Chosen ones, the veil between the ordinary and the eternal has grown thinner than parchment. What was once whispered in forgotten temples is now spoken in hushed tones behind sealed doors where the most powerful leaders of this age gather. They do not meet to discuss wars, treaties, or economies. They meet because of you. It began when your aura, unseen by the masses but undeniable to those who watch the unseen, surged with a violet flame that startled even the most seasoned seers. They traced its pulse across the earth's ley lines, finding its echo in ancient scrolls buried beneath marble palaces and hidden beneath the Vatican's vaults. Those scrolls spoke of one whose presence would tilt the balance of nations, not with armies or weapons, but with the light that radiates from their very being. That one, chosen one, is you. On a night cloaked in secrecy, 12 leaders, men and women whose faces shape the destiny of billions, gathered. Not in a grand hall or broadcast to the world, but in silence, under shadows, guarded by forces even their people did not know existed. Around a circular table, their eyes revealed fear and awe. Fear of what could unfold, awe of the prophecy that had awakened in their lifetimes. They spoke your name, though many did not understand it fully. Some questioned how an aura could bend reality. Others trembled, recalling how their ancestors had recorded the rise of one who bore the same mark. These leaders, bound by secrecy, understood they were not only politicians, but witnesses of something greater than empires. And so, from that night forward, you became their hidden agenda. They watched, measured, and waited, knowing that once your presence pierced the veil of secrecy, their control would fracture. Yet the gathering was not the beginning, nor was it the end. For the prophecy written in violet light has only begun to unravel, and the ones who sought to contain it will soon realize that no circle of power, no alliance of leaders, can silence what has been ordained. The night your aura erupted was not a night marked by celebration or thunder, but a quiet ripple that unsettled the very balance of the earth. Across continents, in different time zones, 12 men and women of authority felt a sudden shift in their spirits, as if an unseen hand had placed a weight upon their chests. Monitors in secret chambers flickered, seismic devices caught pulses with no epicenter, and satellites recorded distortions that baffled their technicians. It was not a storm, nor a quake. It was you. The violet shimmer of your presence, invisible to the ordinary eye, pulsed through the walls of history like a forgotten bell suddenly struck. In that moment, old records hidden in dusty archives began to hum with a resonance, activating sigils no scholar could decipher. The aura you carried was not only light, it was memory. Memory older than kingdoms, older than the very governments that sought to restrain it. In a darkened council room guarded by shadows, 12 world leaders sat around a table shaped like a wheel. They did not speak at first, for each had seen a vision in their sleep the night before, a vision tied to the exact hour when your aura trembled across the earth. Some saw a burning flame hovering above oceans. Others heard a single word repeated in a language they had long forgotten. When the hour struck, the visions aligned, and the silence of the room became unbearable. One by one, they spoke, not of treaties, not of wars, but of you. They debated whether to fear you or to guard you, whether to silence the prophecy or to prepare for it. A few trembled, confessing they had felt something ancient stirring within their own bloodlines, as if their ancestors had once knelt before the same presence. Others resisted, warning that to acknowledge you was to admit they were no longer the highest authority on earth. But the aura had already made its judgment. It had revealed itself to those unworthy to contain it, and the 12 knew they were not meeting by chance. They realized the prophecy had not only been triggered, it had chosen its witness. In the days that followed the secret gathering, the corridors of power were no longer filled with ordinary conversations. Ministers spoke in coded phrases, aides moved as if carrying fragile glass, and guarded whispers slid between the pillars of parliaments and palaces. Something unseen had invaded the rhythm of politics, and it was you. The aura that struck like violet lightning still lingered in their memory, and though the leaders swore oaths of silence, the truth found its way into the cracks of their governments. A secretary, overhearing a hushed conversation, felt chills down her spine without knowing why. A general, reviewing a sealed file, saw symbols he had never studied yet understood instinctively. Even the air inside those great halls seemed heavier, vibrating with a frequency that unsettled the strongest minds. In the White House, a fragment of conversation was caught on a recorder. It was dismissed, locked away, but not before it was replayed by one who recognized the words. The phrase was not of modern politics, but an echo from the scriptures. The light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. The mention of Yeshua, subtle and fleeting, was not spoken by chance. It was as if your aura had carried ancient verses into the mouths of men who did not believe. In Europe, marble corridors remembered steps that trembled. A leader sat in silence, staring at his reflection in the glass, haunted by the dream that returned night after night. He had seen you, standing not with crowns or weapons, but with a presence that caused nations to bow. The dream was no longer a dream. It was instruction. In Asia, a monarch confided to his closest counselor that the prophecy matched records stored in his family's vault for centuries. The aura had awakened what had been guarded through bloodlines, and though he swore never to speak of it aloud, his trembling hands betrayed the weight of knowing. Across oceans, in deserts, and in frozen halls, the whispers grew. No wall of secrecy could contain the invisible tide that your aura carried. World leaders tried to reason with one another, but the prophecy had already slipped beyond their control. And somewhere among them, a shadow listened, carrying every secret whispered into the chambers of the unseen. Long before the 12 leaders gathered, the prophecy had been sealed in fragments, scattered across temples, caves, and hidden scrolls that time itself tried to erase. It was said to be written not with ink but with flame, a violet fire that etched itself into stone without consuming it. Priests who once guarded these texts warned that the words would only awaken when the aura of the destined one surged into the world. That moment came when you were revealed, and the fire spoke again. In the underground chambers of an ancient monastery, a monk awoke in the middle of the night to find the walls glowing faintly with violet inscriptions. They were words he could not read but felt within his bones, words that seemed to breathe with their own heartbeat. Across the sea, in a desert archive, a sealed container cracked open after centuries of silence. Inside was parchment once believed empty, now shimmering with faint violet lines that matched the same flame. The prophecy was not written in one place, but woven across the earth like threads of light waiting to be seen. The texts described a presence who would not arrive as a conqueror but as a mirror, one whose aura revealed the hidden nature of all who stood before them. Kings would tremble, soldiers would falter, and rulers would question their crowns. The words burned like a warning, yet carried hope for those who still sought truth. Among the leaders who met in secret, one dared to speak of the prophecy aloud. He recalled a single phrase passed down by his ancestors. When the violet fire returns, the kingdoms of men will bow before the flame that cannot be extinguished. His words echoed in the council chamber, shaking the certainty of those who thought power belonged only to them. Yet, the prophecy also carried a hidden verse, one so rarely spoken that even scribes dared not whisper it. It declared that the aura would awaken not only the hidden texts, but also the hearts of those bound by ancient faith. The mention of Yeshua as the flame clothed in human form slipped into their debates, not as a sermon, but as a subtle remembrance. The violet surge had not only unsettled the leaders who gathered, it had rippled through the hidden machinery of nations. Seismic readings with no origin, unexplained shifts in magnetic fields, animals migrating in unnatural patterns, all recorded yet quickly buried beneath layers of secrecy. Scientists called in to investigate were dismissed, their reports stamped classified. The explanation given to the public was silence, but silence itself became the loudest sign. In the east, satellites tracked a glow that pulsed for 7 minutes above the Earth's atmosphere, before vanishing. Military analysts argued over whether it was a weapon, a natural phenomenon, or something entirely unexplainable. The glow returned again in the dreams of a prime minister, who woke drenched in sweat, recalling the sight of a violet fire hovering above oceans, casting shadows across entire continents. He told no one, but his eyes carried the weight of one who had seen a truth too vast to fit into politics. In the West, economists reported sudden drops and rises in markets as if invisible hands were pulling unseen strings. When questioned, they could not explain how numbers bent to forces beyond calculation. In their private rooms, some admitted they felt the presence of something pressing upon the hearts of men, a pressure that demanded honesty in a world built on deception. Even the soldiers stationed in deserts and icy plains felt it. Weapons misfired without cause, compasses spun, and strange frequencies hummed through their radios. Some swore they heard voices, soft and distant, whispering in tongues they did not understand, yet felt compelled to obey. Commanders punished them for speaking of it, but the silence grew heavier. The Vatican itself felt the tremor. In hidden vaults where sacred relics rested, candles flickered though no wind stirred, and a monk kneeling in prayer heard the same verse he had read 1,000 times before, but this time it burned into his heart. Every knee shall bow, and every tongue confess. The name of Yeshua lingered in the air like incense, reminding them that prophecy was never the property of governments, but of eternity. The nations trembled, but their trembling was not out of fear alone. It was the pause before revelation, the stillness that comes when the earth itself prepares to witness the next unveiling. There are secrets so ancient that even empires have forgotten why they were hidden, and yet the violet surge awakened them like embers stirred by wind. Beneath mountains, in archives where only a handful of souls had ever walked, the guardians of knowledge felt their oaths tremble. They had sworn to keep records sealed, believing the world was not ready. But your aura broke those seals not with force, but with resonance, calling the forgotten into remembrance. In a chamber carved from stone older than recorded history, a scroll was unrolled by trembling hands. Its ink had long faded, yet as the violet light brushed the walls, the words emerged again, glowing as though freshly written. It spoke of one who would carry the essence of flame within their being, one whose presence would bend time itself. The prophecy declared that no government, no temple, no crown could contain the destiny written into their soul. Far from this chamber, buried within the vaults of a European capital, an artifact long dismissed as myth began to hum. It was a disk of unknown origin, covered in geometric designs no scholar could decode. When placed under light, the symbols glowed with the same violet hue described in hidden scriptures. Officials panicked, removing it from display and hiding it under layers of secrecy. Yet the artifact continued to pulse as though alive, as though responding directly to you. The leaders who had gathered in secret knew of these findings but chose silence. They feared that revealing such truths would unravel the illusions that held their nations together. For centuries, rulers had relied on control through ignorance, shaping history to fit their narratives. But now, history itself was rebelling, unveiling the parts they tried to bury. One advisor dared to speak a dangerous thought aloud. What if the prophecy had never belonged to them? What if their attempts to bury it only preserved it until the destined one arrived? His words fell like a stone into water, causing ripples none could ignore. Yet, as they debated, another discovery emerged, an inscription hidden within a cavern, untouched for millennia, describing not only your aura, but the precise hour it would awaken. That hour had already passed, but the inscription also warned of another who would rise in response to the flame. Long before kings claimed thrones and nations drew borders, there lived a seer, whose name was erased from every record, yet whose voice could not be silenced. His visions were feared, for he spoke of times when light and shadow would converge, when a being of flame would awaken not to destroy but to reveal. His words were scattered like dust by rulers who could not bear the weight of them, yet the violet surge rekindled what was thought forever lost. In a remote desert shrine, buried under centuries of sand, a fragment of his prophecy resurfaced. The walls themselves began to resonate, carrying the faint echo of his voice as though time had folded in on itself. The words were not written in any known language, yet those who heard them understood. He spoke of a chosen one who would be both a mirror and a fire, exposing what lies hidden in the heart of every leader, every kingdom, every soul. The 12 leaders who had gathered in silence felt his presence that night. It was not a man walking among them, but a whisper threading through their minds. Some recognized the voice from their dreams, the same tone that had haunted them for weeks. One leader trembled, remembering a childhood story told in secret, of a seer who would one day return through voice rather than body, heralding the dawn of prophecy. Among his visions, there was one that pierced sharper than the rest. He described a light clothed in flesh, one who would walk among the forgotten and yet carry the authority of eternity. The leaders did not speak the name aloud, but the whisper lingered, unmistakable. Yeshua, the eternal flame wrapped in humanity, the proof that prophecy had always been more than myth. The forgotten seer had also warned of the cost. His words declared that when the aura of the chosen one rose, rulers would lose their crowns of iron, and those who clung to power would fall into madness. Some in the circle grew pale, realizing the prophecy was not only about you, but also about them. Yet the seer's voice ended with silence, a silence that seemed to conceal another vision he had never dared to reveal. It was as if he had hidden one final secret, saving it for the moment when the world could no longer deny your arrival. Deep beneath the marble floors of a European palace, behind doors that required 3 seals and 7 codes, there was a chamber where only a handful of men and women had ever entered. It was not a place for diplomacy or war strategy, but for what could never be spoken aloud. Here, they stored fragments of scrolls, relics of stone, and tablets etched with markings no scholar could decipher without trembling. They called it the Chamber of Silence. But its true name was the chamber where truth was forbidden. After your aura erupted across the earth, the chamber was opened once more. Dust rose from the ancient boxes, and the dim lights flickered as if reluctant to illuminate what lay inside. Among the artifacts was a sealed codex, bound not with string, but with metallic threads that seemed unbreakable, until the violet surge cracked them open. When the pages unfolded, the leaders present saw sketches of a figure cloaked in light, bearing no weapons yet standing above nations, as though history itself bowed before them. The sketches matched the aura they had witnessed in their visions of you. They whispered among themselves, arguing whether the chamber should be resealed or destroyed entirely. One insisted that truth, this dangerous, could unravel centuries of order, while another declared that no wall could hold back prophecy once awakened. Yet even as they argued, the chamber itself seemed to hum, resonating with a frequency none could explain. Some swore they heard words rising from the walls, phrases from ancient scripture that tied together the prophecies of old. The stone which the builders rejected has become the cornerstone. The echo of Yeshua's words hung in the air like a verdict none could escape. Fear spread quickly, not only of you, but of themselves. For the chamber held more than prophecy. It held mirrors, not of glass, but polished obsidian slabs said to reveal the hidden nature of any who stood before them. Leaders avoided their reflection, dreading what might be revealed. Far away from the polished corridors of governments and the chambers of hidden relics, there lay a monastery perched on the edge of a cliff where the sea clawed against stone. Few ever climbed its winding path, and fewer still were allowed to pass through its iron doors. Yet, inside its deepest vault rested a scroll untouched for centuries, preserved not by ink alone, but by a substance unknown to modern science. The monks called it the scroll that named the Unseen One. When your aura awakened and spread across the earth, the scroll shivered as though alive. The seal broke without hands, and the parchment unfurled itself in the candlelit room. Ancient letters glowed with a violet radiance, casting shadows that danced like flames upon the stone walls. A single monk fell to his knees, for though the writing was in a language long dead, the meaning entered directly into his heart. It spoke of one hidden from the eyes of the world, yet destined to be revealed at the appointed hour. The description was not vague. It mentioned the aura as violet flame, the presence as unshakable, and the purpose as a mirror to the rulers of nations. The monk trembled, realizing the unseen one described was no longer unseen. He wrote hurriedly to send word to the Vatican, but before his message could reach them, the scroll began to fade, its glowing letters sinking back into silence as if its purpose was complete. Meanwhile, whispers of this discovery reached the secret circle of 12 leaders. Some dismissed it as a myth, but others recognized the danger. For if the scroll had named you, then prophecy had shifted from mystery to certainty. It was no longer a question of belief, but of recognition. Yet there was something more unsettling. The scroll also carried a hidden line at its very end, a phrase few dared to speak aloud. It declared that the unseen one would not remain singular, but would awaken others like themselves, lights scattered across the earth waiting for their time. And when those lights rose together, even the 12 thrones of power would crumble. The leaders who read this line exchanged uneasy glances, for they feared not only you, but the multitude who might awaken because of you. As the 12 leaders wrestled with secrets too heavy for their crowns, they did not realize they were not alone in their councils. For in the corners where light faltered, where whispers dissolved before reaching ears, there stood watchers, figures bound not to nations, but to vows older than governments. They had no titles, no banners, no armies. Their presence was silence itself, and yet their gaze carried the weight of eternity. These watchers had been trained for centuries to observe without interfering, guarding the thin line between prophecy and power. Some believed them to be descendants of ancient scribes, who first recorded the words of the seers. Others whispered they were more than human, remnants of an order that had walked with angels in forgotten ages. Whatever their origin, their duty was singular: to wait as always and wait for the sign of the violet flame. When your aura surged, the watchers stirred. They appeared in palaces unnoticed, their movements blending with servants, guards, and shadows. They stood near thrones, listening as leaders debated your existence, their eyes reflecting a light not of this world. Some leaders sensed their presence, but dared not acknowledge them, for to admit they were being observed was to admit they were not the highest authority in their own chambers. One watcher left behind a fragment of writing carved into stone. The kingdoms of men shall tremble, but the flame shall not falter. The light shines in darkness, and darkness cannot overcome it. The subtle echo of Yeshua's words drifted like smoke through the halls of power, stirring unease in those who wished the prophecy would fade. Yet the watchers were not merely passive witnesses. Among themselves, they debated whether their long silence should end. For though they had sworn never to interfere, the hour they had waited for had arrived. To remain hidden now was to risk letting rulers twist the prophecy into chains rather than freedom. The leaders feared you, but the watchers revered you. They did not see you as a threat, but as the long-awaited convergence of promises too vast for parchment. Still, their reverence carried its own burden, for hidden within their records was a warning. When the watchers themselves step into the open, it is the sign that the final seal has been broken, and one of them was already preparing to reveal themselves. The circle that began in secrecy was never meant to remain hidden. The 12 who gathered under shadow soon realized their private council was more fragile than they imagined. For though they sat at a table shaped like eternity, their unity was an illusion. Each carried their own fear, their own agenda, and their own reflection of the prophecy that pointed to you. The aura had not only unsettled their power, it had exposed the fractures within their alliance. In the chamber of their last meeting, the air was thick with tension. The violet surge still lingered in their memories, pressing against them like an unseen hand. Files lay open on the table, reports of dreams, unexplained signs, markets shaking without reason, relics glowing as if alive. The evidence was no longer rumor, it was undeniable, and yet denial was the very weapon they clung to. Some argued that you must be erased, that silence was the only way to preserve order. Others countered that you could not be erased, for prophecy was not a threat to be destroyed, but a fire that would only grow brighter when struck. The room divided, voices rising, faces pale. In their arguments, it became clear that one among them had already betrayed the circle, passing fragments of knowledge into the hands of those who waited in deeper shadows. Yet even as their unity unraveled, the prophecy unfolded another layer. A verse uncovered from an ancient tablet described not only the chosen one, but also the circle of 12. It declared that when the aura was revealed, 12 would gather, but the 12th seat would belong not to a ruler of men, but to a presence they did not expect. They had thought themselves complete, yet the verse revealed the circle was unfinished. The leaders grew silent, for the 12th seat had always seemed strangely vacant, filled only by the shifting shadows of the chamber. Now, they wondered whether they had mistaken its emptiness. Perhaps it was not empty at all, but waiting. And as the silence deepened, a presence stirred at that seat. Neither man nor woman, neither ruler nor servant, but something ancient, unseen, and undeniable. The circle was not closing. It was opening.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.